I think it's the most patriotic thing you can do is question and say like, "Hey, this is fucked. We can do so much better." You know, it's like when people are like, "If you don't like it, leave it." It's like, bro, like, what kind of idiot attitude is that? Like, it's like if you had someone you loved and you know they're messing up and they can do better, you want to kind of hold them accountable.
What's up, guys? This is the Mentally Shredded podcast. I'm your host, Chris Whedon, and today's guest, Ben Delacour, artist and just creator. Happy to connect with you again, Ben. This is the second time we've actually had the opportunity to have a conversation. So I'm just looking forward to having you on, having you share your story, and just to let people know everything that you have going on out there in Tennessee. So without further ado, how are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah,
You
man.
know, yeah, just glad that we're giving this another shot. Hopefully the first one was a dry run. I was very sleepy anyway. So, yeah, it's
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. The beauty of these episodes is people expect everything. They see the final product, right? And then they don't see what's going on behind the scenes. They don't see audio issues. They don't see cancellations, reschedule like between
right.
me
Yeah.
and other guests and just what have you. And so I'm always just honored for anybody that carves out time to make this happen. So appreciate it again. But yeah, man, let's dive into it. I know we have a amazing story that we can share with our audience. And I believe real quick before we dive in, you just got back from tour, correct?
Yeah, like a week and a half ago, I
Okay.
guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did that go? Because I know I mentioned real quick in your intro that you were an artist, but let's dive into maybe the band name, what you were on tour for, where y'all went, performed.
I mean, torn is how I made my living prior to COVID. You know, it's kind of a necessary. I mean, it's not evil, but it's a necessary kind of aspect or a big part of what we do. If you're a musician, you got to tour, especially if I mean, you should like even you know Taylor Swift and Beyonce and have to tour. They're out there touring a lot. Just because of the industry being the way. I mean, like any other industry, it was always run by power hungry, greedy monsters. So that hasn't changed. Now there's just less money in it. I mean, I'm like a folk singer, right? So it's kind of like there was never going to be any money in it for me. all my heroes died obscure and penniless, and I'm right on track.
So you what you were saying to our audience is, hey, if you're looking to get in this industry, don't expect to make millions like Taylor Swift right now, right? Like this is a grind, just like any industry. It's a grind when you're climbing your way up. And also, you're a folk artist, right?
Yeah,
So for people that don't know what folk is, because I, when I first heard of folk, assumed it was more of the storytelling, a mix between country and
yeah.
blues, right? Kind of talk about some of your music. I know I've heard some of your songs, but kind of like just talk about some of the inspiration behind it.
I mean, you're not wrong. Like in terms of what you assumed it to be, it is a lot of storytelling. Like folk is a genre. That's what has always drawn me to it. I think it's kind of like a minimalist thing in general. Folk music kind of. I mean, like any term has been, bastardized and as it should be. Things are always a state of flux and mutating and taking on weird forms. I know there's. Yeah, I mean, you don't want anything to be anything creative or artistic to be trapped in amber. That's like stuffed in the Smithsonian Museum or the British Museum with all the other stolen artifacts that people have been, you know, people have been deprived of by great empires.
Fair.
So yeah, it's a lot of storytelling.
Okay.
That's what always drew me to the. I grew up like a listening to that kind of music from my parents. Or like very old rock and roll, like old kind of country blues stuff a little bit, but mostly kind of they're children of the '60s, '70s. My parents, right? So they grew up with a lot of the good stuff. So I had a good education, and like Bob Dylan and the Everly Brothers, and like Neil Young and
Mm.
Van Morrison and all that kind of stuff. But then but then I was like a heavy metal kid, like a punk rock heavy metal kid. Like
Yeah.
I was too young for grunge. Like I liked grunge, but by the time I was old enough to like know what it was, Kurt Cobain was long dead and all those. So I kind of grew up in a very terrible era of music, the kind of late '90s, early 2000s, kind of like butt rock, new metal.
Yeah.
Just one of the most cursed eras in history for music. So I kind of like immediately started once I discovered bands like Nirvana and Alice in Chains, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna work my way back. So then I got more into like metal stuff, like Slayer and things like that. And I was like, yeah, man, this is what's up, And so I listened to a lot of that. So I kind of started playing in bands, those kind of bands when I was like 11, 12 years old. My brother's a drummer, a really excellent drummer, and so we kind of just played in bands together growing up. But that kind of got boring after a while. We had a tour where my brother, who's like a big guy, he like pile drived our bass player into the concrete and like broke his arm, bass player's arm. So the tour had to be like the whole tour had to be canceled. And he had to take months. And I was just like, you know what? I don't want to play in bands anymore. Like, I think this is a sign. I'm not going to do this anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair. Well, it sounds like your parents had a huge influence on this path, especially in music. And now you're
Yeah.
you're a solo artist, right?
Yeah. I mean, I make records, as you probably heard with other people, but like, again, like 90% of my income comes from touring.
Yeah.
So, when I tour, it's almost always solo. I'll do a little bit of stuff with the band, but I like presenting my songs in a just kind of stripped down, me and a guitar on stage kind of thing. I think it's my favorite way to get them across, but I realize that that's maybe not. I don't know. You got to mix it up, I guess. So yeah, like primarily this is very tangential, but primarily I'm a solo artist. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's to answer your question in a very long-winded way. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, all good, all good. I grew up in, you know, competitive choirs, singing, music was a huge part of my life. Grew up in church choirs, right? And so the one thing that I don't do is play an instrument. So I would rely heavily on a band if I were still performing.
Yeah, you know, there's a somewhere for everybody to slot
Yeah.
in, right? Yeah,
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
yeah,
So let's talk about your work. You work with at-risk youth. How did you get involved with that? And I guess if the direction that you went as far as helping at-risk youth had anything to do with your personal journey, let's dive into that as well.
yeah. I mean, it definitely kind of informs. It's definitely part of my personal journey with sobriety, and
Mhm.
I think being of service is one of the best things you can do, both for like sobriety and also just for your general mental health. It's been great for me. A great job. I've never had a job I didn't hate.
Mhm.
Like outside of music. So it's really nice to have a job that I actually enjoy and feel like is providing some kind of meaningful, like even if I'm just a tiny little part of one of these guys' journeys, and it's just this generation, Gen Z, man, they're awesome. I love them. Whenever like, people are like, oh, I'm like, bro, these guys are the best. Like they're just so far beyond as a millennial, my generation. I think millennials were too collectively traumatized to really like do much. But Gen Z, man, they're just like level of self awareness, their vocabulary around stuff, their ability to hold each other and themselves accountable for like what they say, their kind of level of acceptance of each other and acceptance of self is just far beyond any of the other generations as far as I can see, and
Yeah, yeah.
so it's great to work with that kind of age group. And yeah, I
Mhm.
work with teenage guys, 14 to 18.
Okay.
It's in a treatment facility. I've been in treatment facilities, I've been in psych hospitals, I've been in places. So it's if I can just kind of be a supportive, non-judgmental, then I'm good, and then I feel like I'm doing my job.
Yeah. Do you feel like your lived experience has allowed you to be a more of a supportive role for these young men? Play more of a supportive
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably all I have to offer is my own experience. So better to put it to good use.
Yeah. Yeah. Lived experience, I think, is the best teacher. Even
Yeah,
going back to what you said with Gen Z being essentially Gen Z is more self-aware. They're maybe driven more, focused more. They try to stand up for each other more, right? Like,
yeah,
and I'm curious because each generation was raised by the prior generation, right? And so,
hmm
with all the trauma that we had being raised by our parents, right? I believe, millennials had the opportunity to look at our situation. I mean, look at things even today, right? Like with mental health and advocacy and all these things. But we had a decision to make, I think, even at a young age where we started kind of defying norms
yeah,
and stepping out against like prior generations were saying. And I think the kids now were being raised either by millennials, well, most likely by millennials, right? And so when you're raised in an environment by people that have a little more self-awareness than the prior generation, I feel like it's just going to continue to trickle down. And imagine the kids growing up to the Gen Zers, right? Just mind blowing what they'll look back and be like, man, our parents didn't even get it, right? And we're looking at Gen Z like, man, they're so self-aware.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's something I think about a lot too, because I mean, I think a lot of, well, the younger half of Gen Z, a lot of them raised by millennials, but the age of the second half is like a combination, right? Of like either elder millennials or like Gen X. And Gen X were kind of, I think a lot of Gen X, they had a lot of good ideas and stuff. I think, but I think that millennials, we were the ones who, when I talk about collectively traumatized, it's like core memory, 9/11, and then like graduating into the workforce during like the worst recession in modern history, and then like just endless war, and like, you know, the whole concept with, the gas companies and everything paying billions of dollars in advertisement to try to put the guilt of climate change on the individual, right? When you probably remember like when we were kids how they were all like, only you can stop climate change. You have to turn your lights off. It's all your fault. In reality, it's like just five corporations are contributing 95% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Or like I read a statistic like that. I think the 12 biggest cargo ships do more damage to the atmosphere than all the cars in the world combined.
Hmm.
But we were told, oh shit, bro, this is your fault. Like y'all are fucking this up. You better act right, or like everyone's gonna, So it's like
Yeah.
all those little things, right? Also, we were the first generation who like college was like so insanely expensive, and we got nothing for it. I got my GED. Actually, when I got out of the psych hospital for the last time, I got my GED because I wanted to work in this field that I'm working in. But like, no matter how terrible the job I've had, I've had a lot of menial labor jobs, bartending jobs, barback jobs, bouncer, all that kind of stuff, farm work. Most people I work with have a degree. The only difference between we're both working the same shit job. The only difference is they're in astronomical debt, and so it's kind of like we experienced firsthand, like, that we were sold a bill of goods that was, worthless, because,
Mm.
and it's not really our parents' fault, because their lived experience was super different. And, I had very open-minded parents. And I'm lucky in that sense. I mean, I think a lot of my behavior and life choices have been continuing to baffle them, but they were always kind of like, hey man, we see your work and you're doing the thing, like we were, but like, so many millennials, we were like, had all this crazy pressure to go into college, and then came out with all of this debt, paying so much more than any other generation, and the degrees are worthless. Maybe if
Yeah.
you're a doctor, an engineer, like, cool, but the vast majority of them are,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Well, and you'd think a lot of jobs are requiring master's degrees now, right?
right. It's like the new, right. Yeah.
Master's degree is like the new bachelor's. And so
It's a
there
pyramid
are,
scheme.
yeah, exactly. And we understand why, right? The businesses have a vested interest in the colleges. And so the colleges and the businesses are able to operate a certain way. And so you're constantly trying to figure out, okay, well, where do I fit in as an individual on this spectrum, right? Because I went to college, I got a business degree. And to your point, I have college debt that I'm still paying off. And now I'm seeing kids coming out and they're like, I'm going straight to my master's, right? And then, because so at some point, you have to get back to the place of where people were before, right? Because we have a lot of educated individuals who are not
Oh yeah.
true scholars, right? And I believe that, again, going back to lived experience, if you and I actually go through a period of life where we literally focus on this craft and we're just working on this craft and we get 10,000 hours in, I know that's that hot button for a lot of people. 10,000 hours, you're a professional, right? You're an expert. We get 10,000 hours in over here, and this person goes to college and gets these degrees and then goes straight to the workforce. You're telling me that this individual with no work experience, but college experience, is more qualified than this individual that has the hours and the fruit on the tree, can actually go in, show you what needs to be done right off the bat. Now, I believe, this is my opinion, I can pay this college person probably a little less when they're coming right out, unless they have their masters and what have you. And again, why people are going back to get higher degrees. But for me, with the degree, I will always look at somebody's experience. Where did you come from? What did you learn? And will you add value? Period. I don't care about the degrees. What's your heart like? What's your character like? Because I can hire somebody with the degrees that might not be a good fit because maybe their character's off, maybe their integrity's off. Maybe they are a good fit and it doesn't matter. But either way, that can't be the standard anymore. Oh, this person has a degree, so we're just going to hire this individual. There's a lot of people that aren't going to college because they just can't afford to go to college.
Right. Yeah, they can't afford it, or it's that horrible catch-22, right? You come out of college, they're like, we want you to have a college degree plus 8 years experience. It's like, bro, how am I going to get the experience? I'm 22 years old. Like, and then there's the people with experience. They're like, well, we want you to have a master's. It's like, well, I'm not going to go back to school and get a master's to make $15 an hour, bro. Like, that's a whole other thing,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
continued exploitation of work.
Looking for a consulting firm that can help your organization achieve its full potential? Look no further than Deck Leadership. With over 25 years of experience in NASCAR, founders Mike Metcalf and Sean Pete know what it takes to lead high-performing teams. They can help you uncover opportunities for diversity, efficiency, culture, and kindness, all while inspiring human brilliance. And if they can lead pit crews that can change 4 tires and fill 18 gallons of gas in less than 12 seconds, just imagine what they can do for your organization. Visit www.deckleadership.com for more information. How do you feel it impacts someone's mental health to know that they are trying, they're doing everything that, even if they followed the path, right? They followed the path of college, they followed this set path, and they're still behind. They're still behind financially. They're still trying to pay all this debt. They're living paycheck to paycheck, but going month to month, right? How do you feel that impacts someone's mental health? Because you're preparing youth to step into this, right? And hopefully they're better prepared than we were.
Oh, I mean, it has a heinous effect on your mental health. We're completely at mercy of these big corporations, right? Like they set the price of things, they set the wages that they pay people. So it's horrifying that you have to work the vast majority of people multiple jobs, just to pay, and the cost of everything has just gone up even in the last 15 years. It's just 20 years. It's obscene, and people are getting paid the same, and it's that whole thing that people are like, well, if we raise minimum wage, things will get more expensive. It's like, bro, things already are more expensive. Have
Yeah.
you fucking noticed? You've not been paying attention? Like, the things are going to be more expensive. Like, even a used Corolla is like $14,000 now.
Yeah.
Like it's everything is more expensive, and it has been, that is accelerating, if anything, and then, you got people just thinking that raising the minimum wage by $4 is just gonna destroy, the economy. Like, to paint with a broad brush, like, who gives a shit about the economy? Like, you look at the stock market being an all-time high, and you're like, yeah, great. And there's like, you know, even more people living on the street. Like, how does that actually affect the working person or the person who's not working? Because they're just as deserving of basic human necessities and care. And, it's like when it became all about maximizing shareholder profit as opposed to actually having a company that functions and makes money and can employ people. I think was a huge turning point, right? When this kind of like spiritual affliction, obsession of just continuously maximizing shareholder profit became the priority. That was like when, that was when we hit the iceberg.
Yeah. I wonder if
And
that's
so
the
it's had a
danger.
terrible effect on people. It's awful because like you're in huge debt, you're working your ass off. And then you have a lot of people from prior generations being like, well, like, if you didn't go to school, they're like, you should have got a degree. And if you got a degree, they're like, well, you shouldn't have gotten so much debt. And it's like, how do you think I got in debt in the first place, bro? It's getting my degree, And it's like, then you're still working for $15 an hour. And and you're just like, that's gonna, and people wonder why, and I think it's the opioid crisis is very telling, right? There's the majority of countries, or maybe not the majority, but there's lots of countries in the world where you can literally just go into a pharmacy and buy opioids over the counter, and they don't have the issues that we have. And I'm talking about even prior to fentanyl. Fentanyl is a whole different game, but like
True.
prior to that, which is just, fentanyl is just like this, just beyond like a horror movie. But like even prior to that, with the first decade or so of the opioid crisis, it's like, why do you think everyone is turning to things like that? Because like living feels completely just like you're just getting crushed at every turn.
Yeah.
You're just getting shit on by anyone in the political sphere, shitting on you or patronizing you. Employers are just ripping you off. There's no social welfare to speak of for the majority of us. Access to mental health care is, you got to jump through a lot of hoops, right?
Yeah.
It's very, I've been through that situation, and it's, and I'm sure you have, and a lot of people have. All of those things combined, it's like, yeah, dude, there's no wonder people are like hooked on Oxycontin. I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that there's like no, you know, you have people, and then you turn on the TV and people are talking about how the stock market is an all-time high, or like, $13 trillion military budget, and how we have to gut the post office because it's not making profit. It's like, the post office is not supposed to make profit, bro. It's supposed to provide a service. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like you say, oh, the post office lost like however million, hundreds of millions this year. It's like, yeah, like, if you're looking at that perspective, the military loses 7 trillion a year.
Yeah.
Like, if you're looking at it, like, how much profit is that making for it's just, I mean, a lot of people in that world are making tons of profit, in the military industrial complex, but it's just insane. So it's like life feels completely hopeless and overwhelming, and you're getting degraded at every turn, you know,
Hmm.
and that's just like a straight white male, like, for people who are not straight white males, it's even worse, because then, like, culturally, you're getting just, degraded, and yeah, it's, and that's why I think, like, yeah, they do have big problems with it now in Canada and stuff, but I
Mhm.
think it took a lot longer for stuff like that because there's just a different sense of a community, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like people, the society kind of looks after the most vulnerable people for the most part,
Yeah.
or tries to, whereas, that's definitely not the case here.
No, I always say if I was in charge of the nation, and this will probably make a lot of people mad.
Good.
If I was in charge, I would make sure that everybody had there was a set standard of living at a minimum, right? There wouldn't be anyone no one is going to go without food, and no one's going to go without basic necessities, housing and food. I really feel like those two things, if you can figure out how to solve that, like, we would be great, right? And I know there's a lot that would go into that. There'd be a big plan. However, there's when you know that there's enough money to give everyone in the world $1 million, we can just say in the US, not even the world, give everyone in the US $1 million. We would still not be in the situation that we're in now. The problem, however, is financial literacy or illiteracy. The money's going to end up back in the hands that it's in because people don't know what the heck to do. We weren't taught these things, right? Again,
Yeah.
generationally, what were people doing prior? It makes sense why there's certain families and there's certain businesses and things that operate the nation, because they're the ones that were taught. Somebody taught them. They taught their family, so
Yes.
on and so forth. And so, how do you get to a place where it is just at a minimum, everyone has healthcare, everyone has basic necessities? If we get to that point, I guarantee that's the foundation we can build. We can become whatever the America wants to become after that. All the movies we watched growing up, and we believed this was the greatest country in the world, right? The land of the free, home of the brave. I grew up believing that, and I still believe it because this is the only country I truly know. I've lived in other countries, but this is my home, and so I believe in
Yeah.
the best part of my home. But we have a lot of freaking work to do.
I think it's the most patriotic thing you can do is question and say, like, hey, this is fucked. We can do so much better. You know? It's like when people are like, if you don't like it, leave it. It's like, bro, like, what kind of idiot attitude is that? Like, it's like if you had someone you loved and they're messing up and they can do better, you want to kind of hold them accountable.
Yeah,
And it's kind of like, and also the thing about if you don't like it, leave it, like, always confused me because those are the same people who are like very anti-immigration. I'm like, well, how come they're not allowed to not like it and leave it? Like, if like, if they don't like it and leave it, why can't they come here? And then it's a whole different thing. But like,
hmm.
yeah, I mean, I think that all the cognitive dissonance, right, of living in America is
Yeah,
knowing that we have enough houses to house every homeless person. Knowing that we dump so much food. I mean, like, whether it be because of trade tariffs and stuff, or just because, you know, other reasons, like, we just have so much food that just gets essentially thrown away, and
Yeah.
it's I think it's like our most toxic trait as a culture is this like rugged individualism, like toxic individualism thing that's going on,
Mm.
where people think like, oh, like I got to make it myself. Like this is a place to make. Like no, dude. Like no society or culture, people make it. You know, even if you built your own business by hand, did everything yourself, and like laid the foundation, poured the concrete, built the street, everything. Like, who do you think pays for the roads that you hauled that concrete down? Who do you think? Where do you think the subsidies for all your materials come from? Where did you learn how to like do math and stuff like that to measure things out, dude? Those are all taxpayer funded things.
Yeah.
So
I
like, you know, people are so averse to socialism, but we already live in a socialist country to a degree.
yeah.
Every country that functions to any degree. It's like if you want to go to the land of the rugged individualist, like go live in Somalia,
Mm.
where like there's like no government infrastructure, like I guarantee you the people there aren't like having an awesome time and really stoked about being having to be rugged individualists, like
Right.
it's hard out there, man. I mean, I've never been to Somalia, but I've known Somalian people, and like, dude, it's rough. It's this concept of, you know it's just such a little step between I'm going to go out and make this happen for myself, and I'm the only one that matters. I've got to get it before someone else does. We're all just fighting over the crumbs, that are left by the financially literate people. Like I think it's, you know, when am I ever going to need calculus? Like, why do they teach that and not financial literacy?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like all those teachers who were like, you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket everywhere you go when you're older. And it's like, oh, wrong. I do.
Hmm.
But like, I don't know how to open a savings account.
Mm.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think to your point, you said something that sparked this thought, and in every phase of life, every phase of business, you need someone. You can never do it alone, right?
No.
Very similar to plants, right? They survive off of the earth thrives off of plants and bugs and things helping each other and working together. Think about mushrooms, right? Like the phenomenon with mushrooms and
God, I love
how
mushrooms.
mushrooms literally create everything that we see, right? It is literally going to destroy us if we do not figure out a way to come together
Hmm.
and figure out what is best for the human race, not what is best for these group of people, this class of people. What is best for the human race, and then how somehow, just in America, not thinking about the world right now. Obviously, this thought is for the world, but specifically in our country, when you have red versus blue, Democrat versus Republican, right? Like you have all of these ideas and different, we're taught to separate. We're taught to fight against each other, which makes sense. We're taught to fight where our ancestors fought to survive. But we're in a day and age now where we will we'll get so much further by working together. And we can learn from the things that are happening around us, right? We can look at, if somebody goes and spends time in nature, go spend time in nature for a weekend and then come back and let me know, one, how you felt. Turn off all communication, social, cell phone, all of that. Just, and I'm not saying you need to go hiking. I know some people are like, I don't want to live like a homeless person for a weekend. It's not what I'm telling you to do. I'm just saying go in seclusion, get away, turn it all off, and just sit with your thoughts. Sit in nature, like truly, and look around and enjoy like how amazing it is, one, that you are even here, the chances of you even being a part of this, and then figure out, okay, how can I add the most value, not to just my own life, but to the lives around me? How can I leave this place better than I found it? And I think if we can all somehow get to that place where we're asking ourselves this question, the human race is going to be unstoppable. The only thing that can really take us out is a meteor or something crazy besides, because right now we're just destroying ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, we're destroying ourselves, but we're also at the mercy of a very few people destroying it for everyone, essentially. It just feels like an insurmountable task to ask people to think differently. It's kind of like, I remember
Mhm.
reading this book years ago about how, kind of coming back all the way around to storytelling and folk music and stuff like that, like how the only way we understand things is through a narrative, through a story, right? The only way we can conceptualize, which is why capitalism and this rugged individual striving has been so pervasive and toxic in our, not just our culture,
Mm.
but I think we're an extreme example of it. Is because there's not really a story to replace that. You look at the hero's journey or all that kind of stuff. It's always, every story follows that kind of thing, right? So the concept of capitalism ties in beautifully with that whole like hero's journey thing. Of like the individual and they come up against this and then they slay the dragon and they blah blah blah. They have the call to adventure and et cetera, et cetera. The problem is with systems that do work, where it's more communal and it's more, there just isn't a story that works. That's why like we all know that these things aren't real, or that, like, I mean, the systems of government and wealth things like that are, but we somehow still believe that, like, oh no, but like it'll work out. It's like the whole Steinbeck quote about there are no poor Americans, just
Mhm.
temporarily embarrassed millionaires. It's like, and it's so hard to get past that. That's why so many of us default to that kind of thinking, because it perfectly ties in with the American myth,
Mm.
and there's not really a story to replace it. And I don't think we could ever convince people of anything without finding some kind of compelling narrative, and the whole concept of like giving things up so the community can live is like, most cultures existed like that for 95% of the time we've been on Earth, but in the last 1,000 years, 500 years, whatever, that's all changed.
Yep.
And yeah. So the thought of people, even people giving up their prior experience, so many people are like, oh well, I had to work to for a living, so why should we give this house to this homeless person? It's like,
Hmm.
what kind of fucking logic is that? Like, why wouldn't we? Like, who cares? Like,
Yeah.
it's like the world is divided into people who like, oh, I had to do this shitty thing, so I don't ever want someone else to have to do it. Or like, I had to do this shitty thing, so now everybody else has to suffer through the same shitty thing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it somehow invalidates what I've done. And it's like that's an awful way to look at the world.
But I met so many people like that. I've met people in the
Me
mental
too.
health space like that. People
Yep.
like, isn't that the whole point of what the work we're doing? We don't want people to have to go
Right,
through this.
dude. I know. Yeah, dude. It's like, what kind of like monstrous nightmare logic is that? You
Yeah.
know?
I'm curious as we wrap, because I know man, we could talk for days about this.
This went way better than I think this was a way better interview than the first one.
This one was
You know?
fire because we actually
Yeah,
just got
dude.
to sit back, relax.
Yeah.
Um, and so, bro, how do you feel as we wrap up? Like, how do you feel based off of this specific conversation? You are not only showing up as your authentic self, but how you're adding value to not just this conversation, but to your world, to the people around you that you have direct impact.
That's a good question. Well, I feel like I'm really adding value, or trying to add value in the work that I do with, the guys at the
Mm.
treatment center. I try to just be. as honest as I can in my day-to-day interactions with everybody. I try to, I believe, like, as cliche as it sounds, but like I believe in like music and rock and roll and all that kind of stuff is like a truly life-changing force.
Mm.
Like I call these people the cowboys of truth and light, the people who are like, "Oh, I'm just making the world better with my music out in the world." Like like I don't believe in that stuff, Like I think it can, but I don't think it's like, I think that being a musician is, essentially a pretty egotistical thing. So you have to redress the balance by doing things like, in your daily life or in your time when you're not making music that contribute. But like in the music I make, I try to interact with every fan who reaches out to me or people who send me messages or talk to me after shows. And I try to like, because it means a lot to me that people come out, and and I try to just never censor any part of myself with the music I make,
Mm.
and if that makes some people uncomfortable, like that's okay, like it's makes me uncomfortable
Yeah.
sometimes, but I'm just like, this is what came through me, and for better or worse. And I just think try to hold myself and other people accountable in my daily life, and which I don't always succeed in, but I always try to do, and just try to tread gently, I guess,
Yeah.
which I
Yeah.
also don't always succeed in. But and really maybe the most important thing is try to be a really good and present dad to my daughter.
Mm.
I just went
Love it.
through a heinous custody battle. I'm towards the end of it with her mom, and I just consistently. I remember this old timer in AA. I once heard at a meeting he was like talking about people who are being, people who are doing monstrous stuff and just being, he was like, being difficult. He was just like, you know what, you can be right. I'm going to be happy. You can be right. I'm going to choose to be happy. And that's kind of
Mm.
trying to take the high road, which I don't always succeed in either, but I always try to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, bro, I love that. I think I agree with that. It's working to show up, figure out who you are as the individual, and be as authentic to that individual as possible while
Yeah.
growing, while learning all the different parts of you, accepting what is not, and then continuing to grow through it all. Right? That is
Yeah.
journey. That's the life.
I think so. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
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 So,
And just
um,
staying curious, realizing like I do have a lot of strong opinions, but they're always subject to change if I'm,
yeah,
proven wrong, and try not to be too dogmatic.
I love it. I love it. I agree with that. Question: we should always challenge our beliefs. We should always challenge our value system, and to see if we actually even believe in what we are talking about. Do we even believe in the value system that has been laid? And so,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, I think one, I'm glad we had this conversation. I think I agree with you. It was fire, definitely better than the first one.
Yeah,
Um,
man.
yeah, but I think it was just us getting to know each other, getting to,
Yeah, dude.
go for the
Yeah.
dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I'm not even gonna ask the affirmation question because this whole conversation's been fire. But if you
Hell
want to
yeah.
leave an affirmation for us, you can. We'll find you. We'll ask where we can find you on social, and then we'll wrap up.
My socials are, my website is just bendelacour.com. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook. I deleted my Twitter because it was driving me nuts. But yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, much appreciated. If there was something that you could take from this episode, our ask is that you share it. Please follow Ben on social media. We'll make sure that we provide all the links. And if there's something that I can work on to be a better host, my ask is that you let me know so I can constantly continue to become the best version of myself in this arena. So, thank you again for tuning in. Thank you to our sponsors for making this possible. And until next time, love y'all. Peace.